Hi lovelies, you're welcome to my channel. Let's make this beautiful gown with side girders. So I've gone ahead to mark a straight line across like so, and I label that line my shoulder line. From my shoulder line, I'm going to come down to my bust point. From my shoulder line, I will come down to my under bust point. From my shoulder line, I will come down to my waist point. From my shoulder line, I will mark my hip point, and then from my shoulder line I'll mark the full length of my gown. Now I'll go ahead and rule a straight line across those lines like so. After doing that, I'm going to label this my bust line, under bust line, waist line, hip line, and then full length line. Okay, now I'm going to take my shoulder measurement divided by 2 on my shoulder line like so, and then I will mark 3 inches for my neck wideness, 3 inches for the neck depth. Okay, I'll go ahead and connect the point like so. After connecting the neck point, I'm going to come down by 1 inch on my shoulder line. That is the 8 inches I mark on my shoulder line to get my shoulder slope. I'll go ahead and connect the point like this to my neck wideness on my shoulder line. Now the next thing I will do is to take my armhole circumference divided by 2. I will mark the point like so, and then I will connect it to my shoulder slope. And then I'm going to rule a straight line across like so to get my chest line. Now I'm going to divide what I have for my armhole by 2. I will get the middle point, and then from the middle point I'm going to go in by half of an inch. Okay, the next thing I will do is to take my bust circumference divided by 4. I'll mark the point there, and then I'll go ahead to connect the armhole like so. Now the next thing I'm going to do is to come up from my chest line by 1.5 inches. This is how covered I want this dress to be at my boobs. Okay, now I'll go ahead and connect it like so. I'm going to label this my upper chest line. Now the next thing I will do is from this my shoulder point here, I'm going to go in by 1 inch, and then from that my shoulder line point, I'm going to measure what I have to my upper chest line, and I have 7.25. So I'm going to mark this 7.25 down. I'm going to need this when cutting the sleeve. Okay, and this is the reason why I drafted this particular side for this tutorial. Okay, now I'm going to go ahead and cut this out from the upper chest line. Okay, now I'm going to be working on the actual dress. So now the next thing I will do is to take my nipple to nipple point divided by 2. I have 4 inches after dividing 8 inches by 2, and then from my upper chest line I will mark the 4 inches all the way to the full length line. So now I'll go ahead to connect the point like so. Now the next thing I will do is to label this side my center front, and then this side my side front. Now on my under bust beside the dart leg, I'll mark 0.75 on both sides. That is the center front and the side front. And then I will come down from my waistline by 4 inches on the dart leg. Now I'll go ahead to connect the cup like so. That is the dart. Okay, now I will also connect this like so to my bust line. Okay, now after doing that, from this point here I'm still going to mark that same 0.75 on both sides of the dart leg on the upper chest line. Okay, now I'll go ahead and connect the cup like so. If you're on a bigger size, please make use of 1 inch. Okay, now I'll go ahead to mark my body measurement divided by 4. I'll mark the point on my chest line, and then I'll replace the dart intake of 1.5 inches. On my waistline, I will take my waist circumference divided by 4. I'll mark the point there, and then I'll replace the dart intake on my under bust line. Okay, I'll replace it here on my waist line. Now I'm going to take my hip circumference divided by 4. I will mark it there. I will take the same hip measurement divided by 4. I will mark it on my full length line. Now I'm going to go ahead and connect the body point like so. So now I'll go ahead to outline the armhole area, and then I'm going to be cutting this out, so I'm just indicating it. Now below my bust line at the side, I'll come down by 1.5 inches, and then this is the difference between my shoulder to waist at the front and my shoulder to waist at the back. Okay, now go ahead and connect it like so. So I'm going to be closing the side that later on. Okay, now from this 4 inches point I came down by from my waistline, I will go in from the center front by 2.5 inches on that point. I'll mark the same 2.5 inches on my hip line. I'll mark the same 2.5 inches on my full length line. Now I'll go ahead to connect the point like so. Okay, now after connecting it, I'm going to be connecting this from this point here to my waistline at the side. Now this will form that shape for the gathers. Okay, now after connecting it like so, I'm just going to blend this side up, and then I'll go ahead to splash this side for the gathers. So I'm going to splash this into 5 layers. Okay, now after doing that, I'll just label this my layer 1, layer 2, layer 3, layer 4, and layer 5. Okay, now I'll go ahead to cut this out. So I'm just cutting out that part for the gathers like so, and then I'll go ahead to cut the center front. Okay, now I'm going to be cutting the side front, but I'm going to have to close the side dart. So I'm cutting through the bust line like so, and then I'll go ahead to close the side dart. Okay, so after closing the side dart, I'm just going to replace whatever that has shortened from our measurement at the side. Okay, so after doing that, this is all for the front piece for now. Now I'll go ahead to trim the excess out. So I'll go ahead to cut this for our slash and spread method for the gathers. Okay, that is the side gathers. So I just want to quickly appreciate my returning subscribers and then my new subscribers. Thank you all so much for supporting this journey with me. So this is it for the front pattern. I'll come back for the V shape at the bust area and the cape at the bust area. Okay, now to draft the back pattern, I'll rule a straight line across like so, which I label my shoulder line, and then I'm going to be going in by 1.5 inches for my zipper allowance. You can make use of 1 inch, it depends on what you want. Okay, now go ahead and connect that zipper allowance point all the way to the full length line. I'm going to label this my zipper allowance. Now from my shoulder line here, I'm going to come down to my bust point, and then from my shoulder line I'll come down to my back waistline. Remember I said the front half length and the back half length is never the same. Okay, so for mine is 16.5 inches. That is what I have for my waistline. For the front I made use of 18 inches, so it's the difference of 1.5 inches that I took as the side dart for the front. Okay, now I'll go ahead and connect the point like so. So go ahead to know the difference between your front half length and then your back half length. Now I'm going to label this my bust line, my back waistline. Okay, now I'll go ahead to bring the front pattern. So I'm going to measure from the waistline of the front to the hip point. I have 8 inches for the front pattern. So from the back waistline I will come down by that 8 inches to get the hip point. So I'll rule a straight line on the hip point like so. After doing that, I'm going to bring the front pattern paper again, and then I'll measure from the hip line to the full length. So I got 12 inches. I'm going to measure that same 12 inches from the back hip line to the full length. Okay, now I'll go ahead to mark the 12 inches point, and then I'll rule a straight line across like so. I'm so sorry that part is not showing, my camera couldn't capture that part. Okay, now I'll go ahead to label this my hip line, that is my back hip line, and then the full length line. Now from the shoulder line here, I'll mark my shoulder measurement divided by 2. I'll mark the point there. Remember, I'm taking my measurement from the zipper allowance line, and then I took my neck wideness 3 inches, the neck depth 1 inch, and then I went ahead to connect it like so. From my shoulder point of 8 inches, I came down by 1 inch to get the shoulder slope. Okay, now from that shoulder slope point, I'm going to come down by 8.5 inches. That is my armhole circumference divided by 2. I'll connect the point like so, and then I'll rule a straight line across like this to get my chest line. So after doing that, I'll just label this my chest line, and then from my shoulder slope point I will go in by 1 inch. Then from that point, I'm going to measure to the chest line, okay, to know what I have. So for mine, I got 9 inches. Like I said, this will be helpful when cutting the sleeve, okay. That is the reason why I drafted this part for this tutorial, okay. So I have 9 inches. I'm going to mark it there for the back pattern. So I'm going to cut this out so we can cut out the back dress, okay. So now I'm going to take the 4 inches that I took for my dart on the front pattern, okay. So I'm going to take that from my chest line all the way to the full length line. I'll go ahead and connect those points together like so. So after doing this, I'll label this side here my center back, and then this other side my side back, okay. Now from the waistline, that is the back waistline, I'll mark ½ inch on both sides beside the dart, okay. Now I'll go ahead to connect the dart like so to the hip line, okay, that is the hip point. Now I'm going to connect this all the way to this bust line, but I later went ahead to extend the dart to the chest line, okay. So please do that, connect the dart to the chest line direct, okay. So this is me reconnecting the dart to the chest line. Now after doing that, this is what I have for the dart. Now I'm going to label this line my chest line so you know what I'm explaining. Now I'm going to take my bust circumference divided by 4. I will mark it on my chest line as well, and then I'll replace whatever dart intake I have there on my bust line, which is about 0.25. I'll mark the same 0.25 on my chest line and then bust line. Now I'm going to take my waist circumference divided by 4. I'll replace the dart intake of 1 inch, okay. Now I'm going to take my hip circumference divided by 4. I'll mark the point there, and then I will mark the same measurement on my full length line, okay. After doing that, I'll go ahead to connect the body point like so. Now the next thing I'm going to do, from my center back here, I'm going to come down from my back waistline by 4 inches. Then from that 4 inches point, I will go in by 2.5 inches. Remember, I'm taking the measurement from the zipper allowance line, okay. Now on my hip line, I will go in by that same 2.5 inches, the same thing on my full length line. Now I'll go ahead to connect the point like so. Now from this point, I'm going to connect this in a slanted way, meeting the back waistline at the side, okay. And this is the part for the side gather, so I'm just going to blend the side up. Now from the zipper area on the back waistline, I will go in by ½ inch. This is to avoid any form of zipper bulginess, okay. I'll go ahead and connect it this way. So I'm going to be cutting out this point here like so, okay. Now I'll go ahead to slash the part for the side gathers, okay. So I'm just going to repeat the same thing I did for the front gathers, okay, like from the front side gathers. So after slashing this, I'm going to label this my 1, 2, 3, 4 and 5 piece, okay. Now I'll go ahead to cut this out. So at this point, lovelies, if you find this tutorial very helpful, please do not forget to subscribe, comment, share and like, okay. And if you have any question about this tutorial, please feel free to ask me on the comment section and I will reply, okay. So after I'm done cutting the back piece, I'll go ahead to spread this on a plain pattern paper, that is the side gathers, okay. Now I'll go ahead to bring a white pattern paper. I'll get the middle point, and then I'm going to be placing the back side gathers one side. So I'm just make sure that you are following the numbers that you wrote on your pieces, okay, for the side gathers. Now I went ahead to give this spacing of 1.5 inches before I place the other piece, okay. So that is how I'm going to repeat this till I get to the end, okay. Now the same thing that I did for this back pattern for the gathers is what I'm going to do for the front gathers part. Okay, I'm going to place that on the other side like so, and then I will leave 1.5 inch spacing before placing the next one. So watch how I place this. Okay, now I'll go ahead and cut this upper part with 1/2 inch. Then for the side and for the down part, I'm going to be adding the stitching and the hemming allowance on when cutting on my fabric. Okay, so this is all for this slashing and spreading parts. This is where I'm going to gather. I'll go ahead to mark out the middle point, and then I will label one side. The side that is for the back, I'm going to label this the back. The side for the front, I'm going to label it the front. Okay, now I'm going to keep this aside, and then I will be working on the V shape at the bust area and also the cape. So from this my center front here, I will go in by 0.75, and then I will come down by 2.5 inches. Okay, that is how deep and wide I want that V on the bust area to be. Okay, if you over wide this thing, when you sew it, it is going to be too wide. Okay, that's why I took 0.75. Okay, now I'll go ahead to cut this out. For the cape, I went ahead to mark 2 inches, 2.5 inches for the length of the cape, and then for the wideness, I made use of my bust circumference divided by 4, which is 10 inches. So now I measure what I have here on my center front, which is 2.5 inches, and then I added it with the 3 inches I have here on the side front at the upper chest line, making 5.5 inches. So on this my cape pattern, I'm going to mark that 5.5 inches like so. Then from that point that I marked the 5.5 inches, I'm going to trace out the side armhole like this. Okay, so just go ahead and place it on top of it like this, and then get the shape of the side on your cape. Okay, now I'll go ahead to cut this out, and this is all for the cape of this dress for the front piece. Okay, so I'll be cutting the center front unfold, the side front times 2, and then for the cape, I'm going to be cutting 2 of the cape. Okay, so this is how it's going to look like when I sew that on my fabric. Okay, so I'll keep this aside. For the back piece, I'm going to be cutting the center front times 2, the side front times 2 as well. Okay, so this is all for the body part. Then for the sleeve, I'm going to measure for the front, or for my shoulder to my upper chest line, I have 7.25, so I'm just going to mark the point there. And then for the back, from my shoulder to my chest line, I have 9 inches, so I'm going to mark the point there. Okay, so this is what I need for this part. So I'll keep this aside, and then I'll bring a plain pattern paper. I will fold this like so, and then I'm going to be joining the 7.25 plus the 9 inches together. After joining it together, I have 16.25, which I'm going to divide by 2 like so, and then I'm going to be placing one part of it on this my plain pattern paper like so. So I'm going to mark the point here, and then I'll go ahead to rule a straight line across like this. I'll go ahead to cut out the excess. After doing that, the next thing I will do is to measure if I have the same measurement that I want. And then for the length of the sleeve, I made use of 5 inches. Now from that 5 inches point, I'm going to mark, and then I'll connect this straight like so. After connecting it like this, the next thing I'll do is to cut this out from that line, and then I'll go in with my ruler to connect this to this other side. Okay, from the side that is on fold, I connected it to the side that is not on fold. So after I'm done cutting this out, I'm going to notch the part I'm going to slit this from. Okay, so I'll go ahead to slit this into 3 lines. Okay, just like so. And then I'm going to bring my plain pattern paper, a white plain pattern paper. I'm going to place this on top of it like so. I will spread this with 3 inches. That is how puff I want the sleeve to be. If you want it more puff, you can spread it by 5 inches or more, but I want this to be 3 inches. Okay, so after spreading it by that 3 inches, I went ahead to trace this on my plain pattern paper. So this is what I mean. I made use of 1 inch on this part, 1 inch on this part, and then 1 inch on the other part, making 3 inches that I used to spread the puff of the sleeve. Now I'm going to go ahead and cut this out. So after I'm done cutting this out, okay, I'm going to fold this like so, and then from this point here is where the shoulder is going to be. Okay, this is where I'm going to, the shoulder of the sleeve is going to be. Okay, now I'll go ahead to puff this up to that 3 inches that I used to spread it. Okay, so go ahead and puff it to the 3 inches I used to spread it. Okay, and then this is what I have for the length of the sleeve. Now I'm going to indicate this part as the length of the sleeve, this line here, so you will not confuse it. Okay, now, and I'm going to be cutting ×2 of this. So this particular side here is where will be on top of the shoulder itself. Okay, so go ahead and indicate it, and then you also notch the part that will be on top of the shoulder. If not, you will actually get confused fixing the sleeve. Okay, and this is all for this tutorial. Please do not forget to subscribe, comment, share, and like. I will see you in my next video, but for now, bye and thanks for watching.